Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ABC15 Facebook page. We are so glad that you have joined us for today's town hall on a very important issue. You may not know, but today is actually National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And so what better day to dive deeper into this issue that we know is impacting so many people and so many families here in Arizona and really entire communities. And so ABC15, we're all about taking action for our communities. So we have partnered with the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network to provide this virtual town hall, this virtual space where we can dive deeper into the issue here in Arizona, talk about prevention, especially for our teenagers out there, and really highlight the resources available in the community and what each of us can do to help fight this ongoing issue. And so to help us do that today, we will have several guests for you. We invite you to go ahead and put any questions or comments that you have in the comments section, and we will do our best to get to those as we go through. So I want to start by saying hello to Stacy Sutherland. She is joining us. She is the program director for Trust for the Training and Resources United to Stop Trafficking. She's going to help us kick off this town hall today. Stacy, first off, thank you so much for being here with us today. And could you just start by talking about this issue here in Arizona and what your organization is doing to fight this on a daily basis?
Thank you so much for having us. Well, Trust, what we do is we provide education, resources, and collaborative engagement on the issues involving human trafficking here in Arizona. We encourage people to take a 101 just so they can become familiar with what the actual crime of human trafficking is and what some of those indicators look like. We have training available online with some of our partners through the city of Phoenix, and you can find out more on our website, which is trustaz.org, and knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And we actually already have quite a few questions coming in here from some of our viewers, and we really appreciate that. In fact, Angelica Salinas, just a moment ago, asking what the human trafficking rate is here in Arizona. Can you kind of shed some light on how big of an issue this is? I think people tend to think that it doesn't happen here, or that it's happening somewhere else, that it's this far off issue. Can you shed some light on what our state is dealing with as far as human trafficking?
Absolutely. Well, human trafficking is still an underground crime, and a lot of our victims have to understand that they are actually a victim. Sometimes they don't see themselves that way, so it's really hard to get very specific statistics on how many victims we have. But I can tell you in the last few years through the Maricopa County Collaborative, they've identified several hundred juveniles under the age of 18 who are being trafficked on the streets, just the streets here in Phoenix. I can tell you that 1 in 6 runaways is estimated to be at risk for trafficking or sexual exploitation nationally. So if we think about how many kids we have here in Arizona, that kind of puts the number in perspective of potential victims that we have.
Absolutely. And really that it's really more of a community issue, and that there are so many factors involved in prevention. And that's why we're so glad that we have so many viewers already commenting, and hopefully people joining us as we go. I want to go ahead. I know that we have several guests today who can further shed light on this issue. I want to bring in John Meza. He is the president of the Anti-Trafficking Network, and he is also a former police chief for the city of Mesa. So John, I greatly appreciate having you join us today. Welcome to the town hall. You also were an assistant chief when Mesa actually created their human trafficking focused special unit to fight child sex trafficking. So as someone who has seen this happening really on the streets, can you just share first off some of your experiences with this issue here in Arizona?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Yeah, law enforcement has really done a great job over the last 7-8 years to really break down the stereotypes and the myths that surround human trafficking. Probably about 7 years ago, I was introduced to the Hickey Foundation and AATN to really educate law enforcement on what human trafficking was all about. You just talk about the verbiage. Years ago, we used to say we arrested somebody that was involved in prostitution. And today we say we rescued a victim that was a victim of sex trafficking. So really, law enforcement has come a long way over the last 7 to 8 years on really looking at it differently. And then secondly, putting resources into the problem. And we have to identify that it is a problem, and you have to put resources in to combat that, because we want to make the obviously the community safer, and really to go out and prevent individuals from getting involved in sex trafficking, and then holding those accountable that are the customers, because without the demand, there is no crime. So we have to go after the demand, and we have to go out after those individuals that are perpetrating the crime in the trafficking.
Yeah, and so how do you do that? I mean, that seems like such a there's so many factors that go into this, right? And such a complex issue to try to take on. So during your time as police chief, or even with AATN, what are some things that you have seen put into place over the last several years to really try to stop that demand?
Well, number one is buyer beware. With law enforcement, police departments are putting resources into this to go after those that are customers, go after those that are facilitating the sex trafficking, for those that are going after and manipulating individuals to get involved in this business. So buyer beware. There's a lot of different law enforcement operations that continually are going forward. And one of the big things that is really different today is the cooperation amongst police agencies throughout the state, especially here in the Valley, to work together, because you don't want to create the bubble effect where one agency does an enforcement and just pushes it to another city. The cooperation between all the police agencies is really increased, and it's more of an organized effort to go out and hold those people accountable through arrest, go out and rescue victims, and to really make a difference in our community. And it's a full law enforcement effort.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight a comment here from one of our viewers. It's a simple one, but Lindsay Marie, about 3 minutes after noon, just said, finally, it's being talked about. And I'm sure that is some of the challenge, is bringing this issue out of the shadows so that people are talking about it, so that they know it's an issue. Stacy, I'll defer to you with this next question. And John, after her response, if you want to chime in on this as well, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions surrounding human trafficking, especially when we're talking about here in Arizona?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is it doesn't happen here. And through research, through ASU STIR, which is Sex Trafficking Intervention Research, they have actually found that it happens all over Arizona through a variety of different venues of trafficking. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids has found trafficking in every state. DEPS has a great program where they interdict trafficking victims. And we found victims all over the entire state. So it really is pervasive in all of our communities. And I think sometimes we like to put our blinders on and think, oh, this can't happen here, because we really don't want to think about how atrocious that is and how our victims are treated.
Yeah, it's really hard to wrap your mind around the fact that this is happening. But again, John, through your work as well, I mean, you've seen this firsthand. What are some of the misconceptions that you think, or some of the myths out there that really need to be busted surrounding human trafficking in our state?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is people tend to think that this crime is a, quote, victimless crime, and that is absolutely not true. Or that individuals that are involved in the commercial sex business are doing it at their own, or that they do it voluntarily, and that is absolutely not true, because the individuals who go out and prey on vulnerable individuals, they're utilizing force and fraud and coercion to get people involved in this type of crime. And it is not a victimless crime. It is individuals that are really put against their will, both physically and threateningly, or just where they use psychological intimidation. So it is definitely not a victimless crime, and that's something that I think is important for the community to understand.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that a lot of times we get this image of a white van driving down the street and abducting a child into trafficking. It's very sensational. It's a scare tactic. A lot of our victims are being groomed online via social media, apps, places where children go. That's where predators go. So it's important, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes in the prevention segment. But that's how our kids are really being recruited through this, is through grooming.
Yeah, something else, I've interviewed some of the incredible, in my case, I've interviewed young women who have come out of human trafficking and are using their experience and their voice to help others. And I would say all of the ones I've spoken with, it wasn't like a switch flipped and all of a sudden they were in it. It was something where they were in, maybe having some struggles at home. They connected with someone outside of the home, and slowly, that relationship developed, and then they wound up in just that horrific situation. And so I think, to your point, that some of those stereotypes that we think about, it's important to know that that's not always the case. And so, John, I want to thank you so much for your time and for your insight and all the work that you are doing on this. We greatly appreciate it. Stacy mentioned a prevention segment, and so we want to move on into that next piece. And I know, Stacy, we're especially talking about teenagers. I believe we have some statistics here. The average age of entry into sex trafficking in Arizona is 14.2 years old. That was according to the YES study, which focuses on how the life experiences of Arizona's homeless young adults increase their risk for experiencing human trafficking. 14 years old. I mean, when I saw that, that's just a heartbreaking statistic. And when you think of 14-year-olds, they're online, they're immersed in all of this technology. And as parents, as community members, how do we even begin to wrap our minds around children that young being subjected to something like this?
Yes, and we watched our average age actually get lower over the course of years, which could be from technology and that online grooming too. But parents are working. I come from a two working household. My husband works 24-hour shifts. I'm obviously invested in this cause and working every day. And parents are just surviving. And so people look for opportunities where they can connect with someone who's vulnerable or lonely or bored. And the predators don't come across as predators. They come across as friends. So they may message 100 people on Instagram, for instance, and they're not going to say creepy things. They're just going to start a conversation like, hey, what's up? Or just add a bunch of people. It's kind of what they do to kind of start chatting with different people.
Yeah, and all the more reason, especially now with so many young people involved in remote learning and on devices, even more, it's so important to be vigilant and to really know what's going on and what our kids, and not even just your own kids, but kids in your community, what they're doing. I want to introduce Barb Strachan, who we have joining us now. Barb, thank you so much for being here with us today. She's on the board of the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network. She's also the director of social impact programs for the Girl Scouts and the AZ Cactus Pine Council. Barb, I just want to start, we were talking about teenagers and just how young kids can wind up in this trafficking situation. Tell me a little bit about the importance of prevention, specifically with this age group.
Okay, so my belief is prevention really needs to start when kids are transitioning from 5th grade into middle school. If we don't catch them then and really provide them with the education that they need, we may miss the mark. So we're talking about 12-year-olds. That's when you really want to begin the prevention, information and ongoing education about what human trafficking is, but also things like self-esteem and self-worth and positive body image and healthy relationships, those kinds of topics.
Mm-hmm. Now, I am a parent. My 2 girls are very little, though. They are almost 4 and almost 2. So I'm a little ways from probably having that conversation with them. But these are still things that I think about. And so as other parents who are out there who maybe have kids who are approaching, that 11, that 12-year-old age, it can seem pretty overwhelming to bring up this topic with your young child. So what sorts of resources are out there, or what sorts of advice do you have for parents or community members or adults looking to start that conversation with those kids?
Yeah, you don't just go in with the human trafficking education piece. What you really want to do is start to talk about what are healthy and unhealthy relationships. What is healthy risk taking? How to make positive informed decisions. So it's really looking at healthy and unhealthy relationships and framing it that way so that you can have the conversation ongoing and open up those, channels.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you're involved with the Girl Scouts. What sorts of other programs are out there that really do work on some of those key elements of relationship building, positive self-image, some of those other things that you mentioned?
So there's a number of different programs, and one size doesn't fit all. Some of the work that the Boys and Girls Clubs are doing, like around manhood and, what's hip. Also, Be a Leader Foundation with really getting kids engaged and helping them through their educational pathways. There's a lot of really solid programs. One thing unique about Girl Scouts is girls can get engaged from 5 years old all the way through their high school experience. So there are a number of promising programs out there. And I think one of the things that's really important is we've eliminated a lot of after school activities, and those pro-social activities help keep kids engaged and not doing the wrong things. So those are just some of the suggestions. Bloom 365 has a wonderful program. There's Katie's Way around teen dating violence. So what we're trying to do in the prevention arena is kind of capture all of those programs and then being able to say, this is what prevention looks like for middle schoolers. This is what it looks like for high schoolers. Here's how early you can start. And the conversations have to be age appropriate and, be able to talk about it in a way that's not scary and frightening. So you don't want to just frighten people. I know Stacy can speak to some of that. It isn't we're going to drive up and abduct you on the street, although that has happened. That's not the norm,
Right.
So.
Sure. And I want to bring up a quick comment here from one of our viewers or from our watchers, whatever we want to call these fine folks who have joined us today. Mariana Riley. So this was about a minute ago. She said every day should be Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And I appreciate her saying that because she's right. We chose today to have this town hall because it is National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. But really, this should be something that is a focus every day and something that we can all be thinking about and be open to learning more about every day. So I just wanted to thank Mariana for putting that in there because she's absolutely right. Stacy, from what we've been hearing so far in just the last 20 minutes, it's very evident that this is a community effort, that it will take families, it will take organizations in our communities coming together, it will take law enforcement. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more about how vital community buy-in is when it comes to tackling this issue?
Community buy-in is invaluable. Not one agency, one person has the capacity to do this work alone. And so it's really important that we have collaboration across all spectrums to serve these victims and serve our community, just educating them, doing outreach. I love the comment, every day should be Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And I'm super thankful that members of our community are starting to recognize what a big issue this is and wanting to get involved and wanting to spread the message. So everybody watching today, if you could just take one or two things that you've learned here today and just share it with somebody else. That's how we spread our message, and that's how we build awareness about human trafficking.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing is the importance of really creative partnerships, like what we've done with Girl Scouts, the Community School Initiative, CSI program for short, and, Children First Leadership Academy. So making sure that we're partnering and working from our best space. So unique and promising partnerships, getting Arizona State University involved, AATN, like you really want to partner effectively.
Absolutely. And Barb, while I still have you here, I have just a couple more quick questions that I'd like to throw your way to shed some more light on this. You mentioned CSI. You mentioned that program. Can you elaborate a bit on what that program is and some of the success that you've seen coming out of that program?
The Community Schools Initiative is right now at Children First Leadership Academy, which is a school for youth that are in, their moms may be in shelter, or they're considered homeless youth, or have kind of a transient housing situation. And we've been doing this program for a number of years in partnership with Girl Scouts. And one of the really great stories is a young lady named Jennifer. And Jennifer is a success story. She started in middle school with CSI. She's followed through. Now she's a mentor for some of our younger girls coming in. She's in her last year of high school. And she started a human trafficking awareness program, which is peer-to-peer education. So she could tell her friends about it. So that's like really a key indicator of success when kids take and pick up the baton and then want to share it with their friends, because they don't always want to hear from adults, what's right and what's wrong, but from a peer, they're much more willing to listen. She ran our most successful cookie sale for her particular group of teens. And next week, just a shameless plug, starts the Girl Scout cookie program, which then helps fund programs like Girl Scout CSI, things like that. So the partnership.
Excellent. It's exciting, and gives hope that we do have these great programs happening here, but clearly always more to be done. One final question for you, Barb. As far as right now, we have kids learning remotely. We have kids out of school. Things just aren't quite normal right now for any of us, really, but especially for our young people. What sorts of advice would you have for families out there, or really just communities in general, as far as, just protecting our students even more right now?
So, it's really important that connect with positive pro-social activities. So like virtual programs, after school programs where it's safe, that's going to be important. Keeping the lines of communication open, using our mentors to reach out and talk to younger girls so that they feel like they're still heard and listened to. So I think that is a few of the things that we can do, is keep that line of communication going and make sure we're reaching out to the youth that we serve, and keeping them connected is critical.
Yes, absolutely. Always critical, but especially right now during these times. Barb Strachan, thank you so much for your time and for your insight today. We truly appreciate it, and for all the work that you're doing in our community. Stacy, I wanted to get back to one of our viewer questions with you while we wait for our next guest to join us. Becky Finken, so this was about 12:07-ish. She asked, what is the age range of people being trafficked? I know you and I briefly touched on this toward the top of this conversation when we talked about the average age of entry in Arizona being just over 14 years old. But what sort of a range do you see when it comes to people who are impacted by this?
Really, it can go across the spectrum from age ranges. We've even had very, very young children who have been trafficked, and then we have older adults who are trafficked. I wish I could tell you that trafficking magically stopped at the age of 18, but unfortunately, it doesn't. So I've had victims who are on the younger age range all the way up to 50 years old. So it can be a lifelong victimization, which is when Barb was talking, it's important to start having these conversations with your kids. So I'm also a parent. I have 3 boys, and we have these great guides, which are available on our Trust website, how to talk to your kids about trafficking and how to talk to your kids about pornography. We're actually seeing pornography used to groom into trafficking and sextortion, but having these continual conversations with our kids. And these are jumping off guides for parents. So you can read it, and then the conversation I'll have with my 16-year-old is not the same conversation I'll have with my 8-year-old. So parents can be informed, and they can tailor that conversation to how they want to talk about these heavy topics with their children.
Yeah, absolutely. And just give them some extra support when they're going into a conversation. That's pretty intimidating, if we're being honest, for parents out there. Also, before we get to our next 2 guests who are joining us, I do want to just remind folks that we do have the National Human Trafficking Hotline scrolling at the bottom of this town hall right now, 1-888-3737. 888. And real quick, Stacy, I've seen a couple of viewers asking, what can we do? What should we look for? When should we call the hotline? Can you just give a brief kind of synopsis as far as what the hotline does and how folks can use it?
So the hotline can be used by people who want to report human trafficking. You can remain anonymous. It also can be utilized by survivors to get assistance in various ways. Or if somebody is working with someone and they identify as a survivor, they can also call the hotline for services. So things that we want to look for human trafficking victims is obviously we look for people who are working in areas or appear to be being forced into sex acts in areas of known prostitution. This can be illicit massage parlors, street-based prostitution, strip clubs. We look for hotel and motel-based trafficking. We do tend to see sometimes buyers going in and out of hotel rooms. People who are transient who don't have a place to stay. We do worry about our homeless youth who are trafficked because they are trafficked for food, they are trafficked for shelter, etc. And then with our teenagers, we look for kids who are vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Some of the reasons that may make them more vulnerable and at risk for trafficking is if they've been kicked out of the home by a parent or guardian, they're in foster care. LGBTQ kids have a very high percentage here in Arizona that are at risk of being trafficked, especially those who've been kicked out of their home. So we're looking at people who have vulnerabilities. And every human being has something that makes them vulnerable. It's who we are as people. And the traffickers seek out what that vulnerability is, and then they're going to exploit it.
And real quick, I just want to add some statistics to some of those facts that you just pointed out, that this is as of 2020 in that YES survey or that YES study that we mentioned earlier. 2 out of 3 homeless youth reported being kicked out of their homes. 75% of homeless youth report being trafficked before the age of 18, and 48% of homeless youth identified as LGBTQIA. So right there, it just goes to show the many factors that go into this issue and what needs to be done to help stop it. Okay, I want to introduce our next 2 guests. They have been waiting very patiently for Stacy and I to finish up our chat there, so thank you so much. We have Nick Lembo. He is the program director for Just Men AZ, and then we have Chris Glover. He is the program director for Safe Action Project. Thank you both so much for being here with us today. Nick, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. If you could just tell me a little bit about what Just Men AZ does, what your group's about, and how you guys are working as part of this collective to put an end to this issue.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us. I think it was mentioned earlier about demand, and what that is 98% of the buyers are men. So we need to get the men that are passionate about this issue in the community to begin to work to reduce that and fight that and confront the buyers. So what we do, we're just ordinary guys. We're not law enforcement. We're not judges. We're not lawyers. But we look for men that are passionate about this issue and basically say, hey, what can I do? And so we invite them into our teams. We've got teams in Phoenix here. We've got teams in Tucson and in Sedona. And we actually do what we call cyber protection. We get guys together in about 4 to 6 men together, and we post decoy ads on the websites that buyers frequent in order to find a girl to have sex with. Then we have a carefully created script that we begin to interact with them at first, posing as the decoy, but then we come to the point where we explain who we are, that their information is being recorded, we share with law enforcement, arrests have been made, but we have some things we want you to know. That's where we go into the education piece. It's kind of like what Stacy was talking about. In a way, it's taking all that prevention information and sharing that with them. It's, we've been doing this for a number of years. We get all kinds of reactions. We meet very hardcore buyers that don't want anything to do with us. But then we find a number of guys that know they've crossed the line and they know what's happening. There's some interesting reports that have been done by Demand Abolition, buyers report, and it said 75% of former buyers said they quit because it conflicted with their moral values. We saw that. We've got anecdotal proof that definitely proves that, because you would think that these guys are just, not going to listen, don't want to listen to reason, don't want to hear any explanations of what's really going on. But that's not the case. And so we have very good in-depth conversations with these guys, telling them, look, these girls are being forced, they're being coerced, they're not doing this of their own will, they don't get to keep the money. And the reactions are just amazing. And we'll say things again if we keep the conversation going. Do you have daughters? Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? These are the girls that you're talking about that you're wanting to have sex with. So over the years, believe it or not, I've been able to develop long-term relationships with some of these buyers, and actually had met in person with one of them, and keep that education going on in their lives. So we see some definite impact, and we have stopped some men in their tracks. We share the information with law enforcement. Every once in a while, we'll run into a pimp who thinks we're a girl and they're trying to recruit us, and we always kind of enjoy that because we lead them along, and then we just share that information with law enforcement. So it's very satisfying work if you're an ordinary guy who just says, hey, I want to do something about this. This is where, as John was talking earlier, about stopping the demand, because that's what we're doing. We're kind of right at the tip of it. And the guys that are on my team, they know what's happening. I mean, they know it's happening because we talk to these men in our state. So that's just a little bit about it. I can go into a lot more detail. We send a lot of resources to these guys. And so it's very interesting work.
That's really fascinating, Nick, because listening to you talk about that and just that act of communicating with these men who are interested in potentially, buying and being able to change how they view it. Some folks may say, how can you do that? How are you able to communicate with this person kind of non-judgmentally and really push the education piece? So I'm curious too. I mean, what made you get into this work, and how does your team do that?
Well, what made me get into this work is a very passionate wife of mine who got involved in this, and she wanted me to get involved. And I just kept looking then, and I thought, okay, I wanted to see what could I do as an ordinary citizen. And so when I saw this open up, I was very, very excited about it. Again, we're doing, just to be clear, we do text messages, so we're texting guys, but there are some actual phone calls where we talk, audio, I would say face to face, but we are having actual conversations with these guys. And then we begin to just share. We try to find some commonality and some, decency, because it is funny. You'd be surprised that there are guys, they know they're making a mistake. They've crossed the line, and now we kind of help talk them back over the line by sharing the information about, what basically Stacy was sharing earlier about prevention. It is shocking, you'd think these guys understand it, but it's like somebody else said, it should be trafficking awareness every day. And there's not enough out there that guys don't understand. They're being forced against their will. One thing we do send out is, it's called realwomennow.com. I would suggest you look at it. It's a very interesting website. It looks like kind of a comic book, but it talks about what real women want. And what we did is we embedded videos of actual survivors talking about what it was like waiting in a hotel for them to come in the room, and how scared they were, and how they were crying, and they were being forced. So that's very visceral. And so we try to, again, sneak that in. And again, I cannot tell you how many guys will thank us at the end of the conversations, texts, or phone calls for what we've opened their eyes to as far as what's really happening.
Yeah, and some of the statistics we have here show that 5% of men in Arizona buy sex, but that means 95% of men aren't. And so there's an opportunity for those men to jump in and join you in the work that you're doing. So thank you for shedding light on that. Chris, Program Director with the Safe Action Project, thank you so much for being here with us today. For our viewers out there who aren't familiar with the Safe Action Project, can you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you guys are doing in our communities right now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here today. The Safe Action Project is a travel, tourism, and hospitality industry program that's geared to help elevate awareness and action within the industry to help combat human trafficking. Safe Action, or SAFE, stands for Safeguarding All from Exploitation. And we have partnered with the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network, runs the program, but we partner with the Arizona Attorney General's Office and the Homeland Security Investigations Phoenix office to help reach our message to everybody within the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. we've been able to reach out to hotels and tourism organizations so that they can help train their staff so that they know what to look for and how to properly report human trafficking.
Yeah, we had a comment about 1226 from Joe Cully, who mentioned another organization called Truckers Against Trafficking that trains truckers, utility workers, and casinos. And so I feel like we're seeing, Chris, more of this effort to really train folks who may be kind of on the front lines of witnessing some of this behavior and not even necessarily knowing it. Is that what you're finding as you continue to do some of these trainings, Chris?
Absolutely. A lot of these staff are those frontline workers who will recognize some of these indications of what could be human trafficking. And our programming is geared specific to industries, so we have some for front hustle staff, for guest worker or guest services, for food and beverage, just for any bit of reservations, for things that they might be able to see and what they can recognize would be human trafficking. We've been able to work with casinos and hotels. We've been able to work with Hotel Valley Ho and Arizona Grand and the Gila River casinos, and with other organizations, with the destination marketing organizations in Arizona, so that they can be able to reach out to their partners as well to inform them about what could be occurring on their property. A lot of times, the traffickers will take advantage of the situation because they are unaware of the signs. And so will make the hotel or the property a victim as well. And so we want to make sure that we educate everybody that we possibly can so that they know how to properly report and recognize human trafficking on their premises.
Yeah, absolutely. We have about 10 more minutes here. The time is just flying by with all of this excellent information. Nick and Chris, thank you so much again for joining us today, for what you're doing in our communities, and for just shedding light on this incredibly important issue. So thank you so much. Stacy, I just want to circle back with you. You know, we've heard about several different organizations in our communities. We've heard about some of the actions that law enforcement are taking. You know, for folks out there who are listening to this, watching this, and want to know right now what they can do to help with this, what should those first steps be?
Well, if we weren't in COVID times, I would say donate your time to a lot of organizations. Are looking for volunteers, especially those that serve victims. You can always donate money to your favorite human trafficking nonprofit. We are just one of many here in Arizona. Other ways that you can do to help is educate yourself, take a training, visit Polaris or the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They have a lot of indicators and information about what services are available in your state. You can check out our website, trustaz.org. There's a lot of materials on there. Just familiarize yourself with what human trafficking is and what human trafficking isn't, and then talk to people. I think the best way that we can spread this message is to share with people what we learn and keep this topic in continual conversation. So we're not talking about it once a year on Human Trafficking Awareness Day.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment here from Liza. I apologize if I said your name incorrectly there, but this was about 8 minutes ago at 12:30. She says, you know, it usually happens with someone who's a friend or a family member, and they're more often than not may get away with it because parents are looking for someone sneaking out of the bushes. And I know that we kind of hit on this earlier, that idea of a white van driving down a neighborhood road. But I don't think we can stress enough that you have to work through those stereotypes, because this is occurring in different places to folks of different backgrounds. Can you just elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Liza is talking about, hopefully I said your name right, is familial trafficking. So we do have that here in Arizona. And that is where a family member, could be a parent, a guardian, someone related to that person, will actually traffic the victim. But we do have victims who don't know their trafficker. Like, they meet the person in person, they meet them online, and then that person grooms them and they become like a boyfriend or girlfriend figure. Boys are trafficked too. And that person grooms them and then forces them into sex trafficking. So we do see it both ways, where it is someone that's known to the victim and then where they're unknown to the victim.
And we have another comment here from a couple minutes ago. This is more of just a shout out. Bo Sutherland basically saying that he's attended some trainings. This was at 12:37 here. I've attended trainings put on by AATN Trust AZ. They are informative and eye-opening. So just a plug there and a reminder that the work that you're doing in our community is impacting lives through trainings, through speaking engagements, everything that you guys are doing. Looking ahead here, we have about 5 more minutes. Looking ahead, what are some of the biggest priorities for you guys as far as trying to further crack down on this issue, raise awareness about this issue? What can we expect to see coming out of your organization in the next months or even next couple of years?
So right now we're working on a virtual 101 training that will be on demand. So anybody can log on any time of the day and take a very brief 101 training so they can learn the signs of human trafficking and the indicators. We are also working with a couple of police departments here in the Valley to work on an internet safety brochure for parents so we can talk to them about what internet safety means and what it looks like. The apps change so fast. It's so hard for parents to keep track of. Safe Action Project has 10 hotels that are currently safe certified. That means 75% of their staff or more have learned about human trafficking and how to report it. So you'll be seeing a growing number of hotels and other travel-based tourism agencies being safe certified here. Just Men has been growing, so I see them tackling demand and working on some massage parlor issues. And CSI continues with their after-school program, and we're serving children in the 7th and 8th grade and giving them a safe place to go after school. And not only that, but we're teaching them about all kinds of things: trafficking, drugs, gangs, healthy relationships, and we take them on field trips and we try to encourage them to go to high school and college and let them know that they're not stuck in the cycle that they're in. And then we keep fighting demand as well and doing education and public awareness about demand. If there were not buyers, there would not be sex trafficking. So that's something very important to remember.
Mm-hmm. And then just as we wrap up here, in all your years of doing this work, what have you seen that gives you hope that there's potential to, make a dent in this issue, to stop this issue eventually? What have you seen in our communities from our leaders?
I've seen a lot of passion on this issue. We're very fortunate to have a lot of passionate people here in Arizona that have made this cause their priority. A lot of survivors from Arizona who have beaten all the odds and have come out on top, who are now mentoring those who are being, I don't want to say rescued, but recovered from trafficking situations. And some of them are a part of that collaborative. And so they have survivor mentors for the teenagers who are being taken out of human trafficking. And that's been highly successful thanks to those survivors being able to connect with those victims. And collaboration. Arizona, I might be biased, but we do it so well and we get along and we all work together for the common good of serving our community.
And it's great to see that happening, and just so important to not just stop here when it comes to sharing about resources and talking about this issue, but as our viewer said earlier, to make sure that every day really is Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and that this is something that is out there in the spotlight. And so, Stacy, I want to thank you so much. Thank all of you over at Trust for all of the work that you're doing. Want to remind folks real quick, we have some websites here that you can visit for more information, trustaz.org. Also, we have the number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline scrolling at the bottom of the screen if you want to write that down. That's for anyone who may think that they're seeing human trafficking, or for somebody who's potentially a victim of human trafficking and needs help. So that serves 2 purposes there. And again, just encouraging folks to visit those websites to educate themselves and to keep this issue in the spotlight. So that concludes our ABC15 virtual town hall in partnership with the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network. I want to thank you all so much for joining us, for your questions, and we hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much.